She woke up to the same sound she had heard every morning for as long as she could remember, the soft hum of the heater, the faint buzz of the street outside, and the distant barking of a dog that seemed to live 2 houses down. For a moment, she just lay there, letting the sounds wash over her, not ready to move yet. The bed was warm, the sheets soft, and it was tempting to stay wrapped in the comfort of nothingness. But she knew she had a day to start, and so, reluctantly, she swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood up. The room felt cold without the sun, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones if you linger too long. She pulled on a sweater that had seen better days and padded across the floor. Bare feet making soft taps against the worn wooden boards. Her morning routine was nothing special. Nothing that anyone outside her small world would notice. She made tea, strong and bitter, just the way she liked it, and watched the steam rise in gentle curls from the cup. She stared out the window at the world outside, where the sky was still pale with the first light of day, and the streets were slowly waking up. People hurried past her view, bundled against the cold, their faces buried in scarves and hats. Some of them seemed so focused, so purposeful, and she couldn't help but feel a little invisible in comparison. Her life, in her own eyes, felt small and ordinary. It was the kind of life where nobody noticed the small victories, the way she had managed to wake up early again, the way she had made her breakfast without spilling anything, the way she had put on clean clothes. These things seemed too tiny, too mundane to matter in a world that demanded big gestures and dramatic moments. She sipped her tea and thought about the day ahead. It was going to be just like yesterday and the day before and the one before that. Work would be the same, arriving on time, doing her tasks quietly, avoiding unnecessary conversation, and returning home with the weight of the day in her shoulders. She liked the predictability of it, even if it felt monotonous. There was a strange comfort in knowing exactly what to expect. She didn't mind blending into the background. In fact, she preferred it. Attention was heavy. She had learned long ago that it often brought more problems than satisfaction. As she finished her tea, she glanced at the small calendar pinned to the wall above her kitchen counter. It was filled with notes, reminders, and little doodles she had made over the months. A few deadlines for work, some appointments, and scribbled reminders of things she wanted to do someday, maybe. Looking at it, she felt the faintest pang of longing. There were dreams she had buried deep, dreams she barely allowed herself to think about. She used to imagine herself doing incredible things, achieving something that mattered, something that would make her feel alive. But those thoughts had been pushed aside, placed by the quiet acceptance of normal life. The streets outside grew busier as she got ready to leave. She pulled her coat tight around her and stepped out into the crisp morning air. The city had that particular energy in the early hours, a mixture of calm and motion, like it was waking up with one foot in sleep and the other already racing ahead. She walked the familiar path to work, nodding to a few neighbors, exchanging brief greetings with people she knew. Though she never stayed long enough to make conversation, her mind wandered as her feet carried her along. She thought about the little things, the bakery she passed that smelled of fresh bread, the old man who always sat on the same bench reading a newspaper, the stray cat that always watched her from the corner of the street. These were the details that made life bearable. That made her feel connected to the world in a way that nothing else could. Arriving at work, she slipped through the door quietly, nodding to the receptionist who barely looked up from her desk. The office was the same as it always was, rows of desks, buzzing computers, and the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. She settled into her chair, booted up her computer, and began the familiar routine of emails, reports, endless small tasks that seemed to fill every hour without really accomplishing anything meaningful. Her coworkers were polite enough, but she didn't feel a real connection with any of them. They were friendly in the way people are when they share space, not when they truly care. By mid-morning, she found herself at the window again, looking out at the city beyond. Cars moved like tiny ants along the streets. People hurried along the sidewalks. And the world seemed so full of life outside, while her own life felt paused, waiting for something that hadn't yet arrived. She knew she had to keep going, keep working, keep moving through the motions. But a small part of her wished for a spark, something unexpected to break the routine. She had heard stories of people whose lives changed in an instant. moments that transformed ordinary days into extraordinary memories. She often wondered if that could ever happen to her, though she would never say it out loud. Lunch came, and she ate at her desk, as she usually did. The food was simple, just a sandwich she had made that morning. She scrolled through her phone, not really looking for anything in particular, just passing the time, letting the small distraction fill the emptiness of the midday lull. She noticed a friend had sent a message, asking if she wanted to meet for coffee later. She hesitated. It was tempting, the idea of a brief change from the routine, but she shook her head and typed a polite decline. She had learned that small comforts were safer than unexpected events. The afternoon stretched long and quiet. She tackled her tasks with care, focusing on the small accomplishments the emails sent. The documents checked and filed, the little victories that went unnoticed by everyone else. There was satisfaction in completing her work well, even if it didn't attract attention or praise. Still, she felt a quiet yearning. A small part of her wondered what it would be like to step outside the boundaries of her ordinary life, to do something that mattered, to surprise even herself. But that part was small, timid, and cautious, and she quickly pushed it aside. The day ended, and she walked home as the sun began to dip below the horizon. The streets were bathed in golden light, the kind that made even ordinary buildings look beautiful. She watched children playing in the park, their laughter ringing through the air, and felt a small smile tug at her lips. Life continued around her, full of color and sound, while she carried her quiet existence through it. She thought about dinner, about the small comforts of home, the warm apartment, the books she liked to read, the soft blanket waiting for her on the couch. These things were enough, she told herself. Even if they weren't extraordinary, back in her apartment, she set her bag down and began to unwind. She lit a candle, the soft flame flickering and casting shadows on the walls. She made herself a simple meal and sat by the window, eating slowly, listening to the city outside. The lights came on in the buildings across the street, one by one, like stars being placed carefully in a sky that belonged to the city. She felt the day's fatigue in her muscles, the quiet satisfaction of having completed another ordinary day as night fell. She sat in the quiet, thinking about the world beyond her walls. She imagined stories of people whose lives had changed overnight. People who had started with nothing remarkable and ended up achieving incredible things. She allowed herself, just for a moment, to imagine what it would feel like to be noticed, to be remembered, to be part of something bigger than the routine that had defined her life for so long. The thought was thrilling, almost terrifying, and she quickly pushed it away. Dreams like that were dangerous. They promised excitement, but often led to disappointment. She read a few pages of a book before setting it aside. The words on the pages felt alive, but they were not her story. She felt the tug of sleep finally, and she crawled into bed, pulling the blankets up to her chin. The room was dark now, the only light coming from the faint glow of the street lamp outside. She closed her eyes, letting herself drift into the safety of sleep. Tomorrow would be another ordinary day, just like today, just like the one before it. And yet as she drifted, a small, quiet feeling lingered in her chest, feeling she could not name. A feeling that something might be waiting for her, just beyond the horizon of her normal life. She did not know what it was, or how it would find her, but it felt like the first hint of a story that had yet to begin. And so, she slept, unaware that her ordinary life was on the brink of change. A small spark had been lit, something subtle yet undeniable, something that would quietly grow until it became impossible to ignore. She had started normally, as she always did, but the world had a way of surprising even the most cautious hearts. And soon, very soon, her life would shift in ways she could never have imagined. The next morning, she woke up feeling the same as she always did. The alarm rang at the usual time, the sunlight crept in through the blinds, and the world outside waited for her, like it always had. But something felt different. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, like the air had a slightly sharper edge, or the coffee smelled a little sweeter, or maybe it was just her imagination. She shrugged it off and went through her routine as usual, washing her face, brushing her teeth, and getting dressed in clothes that had long lost the thrill of being new. Still, as she looked in the mirror, she felt a small spark of curiosity, the kind of curiosity that makes you wonder. F today might hold something unexpected. The day at work began like any other. She walked the familiar streets, nodded to the same neighbors, and entered the office with a polite smile. Emails waited for her, reports needed checking, and the hum of computers filled the space like a constant, unchanging pulse. But then, a small interruption appeared in the flow memo, pinned to the board she often ignored. Something that caught her attention purely by chance. It was an invitation to participate in a project she hadn't known existed, something new that didn't fit into her routine. She read it once, then twice, unsure if she should take it seriously. Most of her coworkers would glance and forget it immediately, but for some reason, she didn't. Her heart beat a little faster. Her mind tugged by the possibility of stepping beyond the walls of normalcy. She hesitated at first, thinking about all the reasons not to try. She could fail. She could make a fool of herself, or worse. She could be ignored like she often felt in her day-to-day life. Fear tried to settle in, whispering that her ordinary life was safe, that stepping outside it might bring disappointment. Yet beneath the fear, there was something else, an undeniable pull, a quiet insistence that maybe, just maybe, she could do something different, something remarkable. The moment passed, but the feeling lingered like a tiny ember waiting to catch fire. By mid-morning, she decided to act. It was small at first, just a quick response to the memo, a note of interest, a signal that she was willing to try. Her hands trembled slightly as she sent it, but once it was done, a weight lifted off her shoulders. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of agency. The rare and exciting sensation of choosing her path rather than merely following it. She returned to her tasks with a lighter step. Noticing details, she had always overlooked the sunlight catching dust in the office air. The quiet rhythm of the keyboard clicks, the way a coworker's laugh could suddenly seem brighter than usual. It was like seeing the world in color after years of gray. By lunch, her curiosity had grown into a quiet excitement. She left her desk and walked to the small park nearby, the one she had often passed without a second thought. Today she lingered. She noticed the patterns in the leaves, the way the wind moved them, the way a bird hopped along the path as if it had somewhere important to go. She sat on a bench and let herself watch. Really watch, instead of thinking about her routine. Her responsibilities, her usual obligations. She realized that she had been living life in a sort of sleepwalk, letting days pass without truly noticing the small wonders around her. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel alive, even if just a little. When she returned to the office, she felt a change in her pace. Her steps were lighter, her posture more upright, her mind sharper. People around her seemed to notice. Her coworker, usually polite but distant, smiled and asked about her morning. A small conversation ensued, nothing extraordinary, but enough to make her feel seen. It was the kind of interaction she hadn't realized she missed until it happened. The day moved forward, filled with the usual tasks, but now, even the mundane felt slightly more vibrant, infused with the sense that something new was possible. The afternoon brought the first real challenge. The project she had volunteered for required her to present an idea, something that she had never done before in such a formal way. Her heart raced at the thought. She was used to working quietly, completing tasks without drawing attention. Speaking in front of others, sharing her thoughts openly, felt terrifying. But instead of retreating, she reminded herself of the small spark that had led her here. She took a deep breath and began to plan, carefully, thoughtfully, making sure every point was clear, every idea polished. The fear didn't disappear, but it became manageable. It's a companion rather than a barrier. When the time came to present, she felt her knees shake slightly. The room was filled with her colleagues, some familiar, some she barely knew. She took a moment to look around, to breathe, and then she spoke. Her voice started quiet, hesitant, but as she continued, she found rhythm, confidence, and clarity. Her ideas flowed naturally, her words connecting with the listeners in a way she hadn't imagined possible. She felt the spark inside her grow brighter, a feeling of exhilaration that she had almost forgotten existed. The presentation ended, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, applause. It was soft at first, polite, but genuine. Faces that had barely acknowledged her before now held respect, curiosity, even admiration. She walked back to her seat with a mix of disbelief and pride. For the first time, she realized that she could step outside her comfort zone and succeed. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Emails were answered, tasks completed, but her mind kept returning to the presentation. The feeling of having tried something new and been rewarded. It was intoxicating, and she found herself smiling more than usual. Noticing things she had never paid attention to, feeling a sense of energy and possibility that she hadn't known she had. When the workday ended, she lingered a moment at her desk, staring out the window, watching the sky shift from gold to pink to deep blue. The city seemed alive in a new way, vibrant and full of potential. She felt a strange kinship with it, a sense that she, too, could grow and change. Move beyond the boundaries she had always accepted. Walking home, she felt a lightness in her steps that she couldn't remember having before. She noticed details along the streets, the cracks in the pavement, the shadows of trees, the faces of strangers passing by. Each detail felt significant, part of a larger tapestry she had rarely paused to notice. She thought about her day, about the small act of courage that had set everything in motion. It was incredible to her that one simple choice, to try, to step forward, to risk embarrassment, could feel like it had shifted the course of her life, even if just slightly. When she reached her apartment, she felt both exhausted and energized. She made a simple meal, but even that felt different. She cooked with attention, noticing textures, smells, and tastes she had often overlooked. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, feeling a gratitude for the small pleasures she usually took for granted. Afterward, she sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker on, each one a tiny story unfolding in the night. She thought about what tomorrow might bring, feeling a mixture of anticipation and calm she had never felt before. The evening passed quietly, but it was not the same quiet as before. It was filled with thought, reflection, and the sense that life had opened a new door, one that she had only just stepped through. She thought about the challenges that might lie ahead, the fear she would have to face, and the unknown she would have to navigate. But she also felt a sense of possibility, a recognition that life could hold more than she had believed, that she could surprise herself in ways she had not yet imagined. Before sleep, she sat with her journal, something she had abandoned months ago. She wrote about the day, about the feelings it had stirred, about the small victories and the sparks of courage she had discovered within herself. Writing made it real, tangible, something she could hold on to. She realized that the day had not only changed how others saw her, but how she saw herself. She felt stronger, more capable, more alive. It was a small beginning, but it was the start of something important, something that could grow into a life far different from the ordinary one she had accepted for so long. As she finally lay down to sleep, she felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her mind wandered over the events of the day, replaying each moment, each interaction, each small triumph. She thought about what she had learned about herself, the quiet courage, the willingness to try, the ability to step beyond fear. She felt a sense of pride, not the kind that needed validation from others, but the quiet, deep kind that comes from knowing you have done something difficult, something brave. Even as sleep claimed her, the spark remained. It lingered like a soft flame in her chest, ready to grow, ready to illuminate paths she had never dared to explore. She did not yet know where this journey would lead, what obstacles she would face, or what triumphs awaited her. But she knew, in the quiet certainty that sometimes comes in the moments between wakefulness and dreams, that her life had begun to shift. Something incredible was on the horizon, something that would stretch her, challenge her, and transform her in ways she had never imagined. And so, she slept, not as the same person who had woken in the morning, but as someone who had taken the first steps toward a life larger than the one she had always accepted. She had started normally, yes, but the spark that had been lit could not be contained. It would grow, and soon it would change everything. The next few days passed in a strange blend of normalcy and subtle change. On the surface, everything looked the same. She still walked the same streets, sat at the same desk, answered the same emails. and returned to her small apartment at night. The routines were still there, predictable and familiar, but underneath, something inside her was shifting. The spark she had felt during the project presentation had not faded. In fact, it was growing, quietly pushing her toward moments she would have once avoided. It started with small risks. She began offering her ideas more freely in meetings, even when she was unsure of how they would be received. She spoke up when she had questions, asked for clarification, and even challenged some suggestions that didn't feel right to her. At first, it was nerve-wracking. Her voice would shake, her stomach would twist, and she often worried that others were silently judging her. But every time she pushed past the fear, she discovered that her thoughts had value. People listened, nodded, and sometimes even thanked her for speaking up. It was a revelation, this idea that her perspective mattered, that she could contribute in ways she had long believed were reserved for others. Outside of work, she began noticing the world differently. She started walking routes she had never taken, exploring small streets and alleys she had always ignored. The city, which had once felt predictable and gray, now seemed alive with possibility. She noticed murals painted on walls, small cafes tucked between larger buildings, and the expressions of people passing by. Each detail seemed more significant, more meaningful, and she felt a growing sense of connection to the world around her. Life was no longer something she moved through. It was something she observed, engaged with, and even shaped in small ways. Despite the excitement, challenges quickly made themselves known. Not everyone in her life understood the change they were witnessing. Some coworkers were wary of her growing confidence. A few whispered, quietly questioning whether she was overstepping, whether she had suddenly changed too much. There were moments when she felt isolated, caught between the person she had been and the person she was becoming. She noticed it most during team discussions, when a casual comment would be met with silence or a subtle look of disapproval. The uncertainty stung, but she refused to let it stop her. She reminded herself that growth often comes with discomfort, that breaking free of old patterns rarely feels easy. One afternoon, she faced one of her first real tests. A problem arose in the project she had joined, something urgent that required quick thinking and decisive action. The leader of the team looked to her for input, and for the first time, she felt the weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. The fear she had once felt, the fear of making a mistake, being judged, was still there, but it was tempered by a sense of purpose. She spoke clearly, suggested a solution, and offered a plan to implement it. The room listened. Her idea was adopted, and the relief and quiet pride she felt were immense. It was the first time she truly understood that her contributions could create real impact. As the days turned into a week, she began to push herself in other areas of life. She took up small hobbies she had once abandoned. She started sketching again, something she hadn't done in years. She wrote short notes and stories, capturing moments of the day, ideas, and feelings she had often ignored. It was a way to express herself, to process the changes happening within her, and to create something tangible from the invisible shift she felt inside. These small acts of creation brought joy and clarity, reinforcing the sense that she was no longer a passive participant in life. Her social interactions began to change as well. She reached out to friends she hadn't spoken to in months, rekindling connections that had faded under the weight of routine. The conversations were awkward at first, filled with tentative words and pauses, but they soon grew richer. She found herself laughing more freely, sharing thoughts she had kept hidden, and listening with a depth of attention she had rarely given before. People responded to the change in her energy. They were drawn to her curiosity, her sincerity, and the subtle confidence that now colored her presence. She realized that her growth was not just about what she could achieve alone. It was also about the connections she could nurture, the relationships that could deepen when she allowed herself to be seen. Despite the progress, fear and doubt remained. Some mornings, she woke up feeling uncertain, questioning whether she was moving too fast, whether she could handle the responsibilities she had embraced, whether the spark she felt might burn out. She learned to live with that tension, recognizing that it was a sign she was stretching beyond her comfort zone. She practiced patience with herself, understanding that growth is rarely linear. Some days brought small victories, others small setbacks. And both were equally important in shaping her path forward. One evening, she received an unexpected opportunity. A mentor from her project invited her to participate in a special workshop hand event designed to challenge participants, to develop new skills, and encourage creativity under pressure. The invitation was both thrilling and terrifying. Attending meant stepping even further into the unknown, risking failure in front of strangers, and opening herself to experiences she had never imagined. She hesitated, thinking about the safety of her routines, the comfort of her predictable days. But the spark inside her had grown too strong to ignore. She accepted, feeling a mixture of excitement and anxiety that made her heart race. The workshop began on a chilly morning, and she arrived early, her nerves buzzing with anticipation. She looked around at the other participants, all of them energetic, confident, and full of ideas. She felt a familiar pang of insecurity, but quickly reminded herself of what she had already achieved. She had taken risks before, faced fear, and discovered strengths she had not known existed. This was another step, and she was ready to take it. The first exercises were simple, designed to build trust and cooperation. She listened carefully, participated fully, and allowed herself to be seen by others. The small victories of being heard, of contributing, of making a difference, reinforced her growing confidence. As the day progressed, the challenges became more complex, requiring creativity, quick thinking, and collaboration. She found herself stepping into roles she had never imagined, leading discussions, proposing strategies, solving problems under pressure. Each success, no matter how small, fueled the spark, growing it into a steady flame of determination and possibility. By the end of the first day, she felt exhausted but exhilarated. The workshop had pushed her to her limits, challenged her assumptions, and revealed capabilities she had never recognized in herself. She realized that fear and discomfort were not enemies. They were indicators that she was growing, stretching, and moving beyond the boundaries of her old life. She returned home physically tired but mentally energized, replaying the events of the day, reflecting on the skills she had used, and the courage she had discovered within herself. Over the next few days, she continued to practice what she had learned. She experimented with new ideas at work, approached problems differently, and took initiative where she had once hesitated. Her confidence grew, and with it, a quiet sense of empowerment. She noticed that her perspective had shifted. She was no longer afraid to fail, to be wrong, or to take responsibility. She had learned that mistakes were not signs of weakness, but opportunities for growth, and that the act of trying itself carried value at home. She began to apply the lessons of courage and curiosity to her personal life. She explored new places in her city, visited art galleries she had never thought to enter, and attended talks and events that stretched her understanding of the world. She discovered communities of people who shared her interests, and she allowed herself to engage fully rather than remaining on the sidelines. These experiences deepened her sense of purpose, reinforced her growing confidence, and reminded her that life was richer and more vibrant when she embraced it fully. Evenings became a time of reflection. She would sit by her window, journal in hand, writing about the challenges she had faced, the victories she had achieved, and the lessons she was learning. These reflections helped her process the rapid changes in her life, understand her emotions, and solidify the new skills and attitudes she was developing. She noticed a growing resilience within herself, a capacity to face uncertainty, adapt to new circumstances, and move forward despite fear. Friends and family began to notice the change. They remarked on her energy, her confidence, and the sense of purpose that now colored her days. Some were curious, others skeptical, but most were supportive in quiet ways. Their recognition reinforced her sense that she was on the right path, that the risks she had taken and the efforts she had made were creating meaningful transformation. She realized that while change often feels like a personal journey, it is also shaped by the relationships and interactions we nurture along the way. As the weeks passed, she faced setbacks as well. Not every project succeeded, not every idea was well received, and not every social interaction went smoothly. There were moments of disappointment, frustration, and doubt. Yet she found that she could navigate these challenges with grace and patience. She learned to celebrate small victories, learn from mistakes, and maintain her commitment to growth. The spark that had first ignited during her presentation was now a steady flame, guiding her through the highs and lows, reminding her of her potential and her strength. By the end of this period, she felt a profound shift within herself. She was no longer the person who had walked through life unnoticed, quiet and hesitant. She had discovered courage, creativity, and resilience. She had taken risks, faced fear, and experienced the thrill of growth. The ordinary routines of her life were still present, but they were now infused with possibility, potential, and the promise of something extraordinary. And as she lay down to sleep each night, she felt a quiet satisfaction, a recognition that she was capable of far more than she had ever imagined, that the spark within her could grow into something incredible, and that the journey she had begun was only just starting. The ordinary life she had once accepted had begun to transform. One small choice, one brave act, one step at a time. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet changes she had been cultivating began to show in ways she had never imagined. The spark that had once flickered inside her now burned steadily, illuminating corners of her life that had long remained in shadow. At work, she found herself trusted with responsibilities that had previously seemed reserved for others. The team began to look to her for guidance, asking for her input and seeking her opinion on matters that mattered. It was a new experience, one that brought a mix of pride and nervousness, but she embraced it with a careful determination, understanding that growth often comes with both excitement and challenge. One morning, she arrived to find a message waiting for her from her manager. It was short, direct, but carried weight, a request to lead an important meeting with clients from outside the company. She read the message twice, her heart beating fast. This was a step she had never imagined taking so soon. She knew it would be challenging, that the stakes were high, and that mistakes could have visible consequences. But she also knew that this was the moment she had been preparing for, the opportunity to take everything she had learned and show it in action. She accepted the task with a mixture of excitement, careful focus. The days leading up to the meeting were filled with preparation. She reviewed every detail, anticipated questions, and rehearsed her presentation repeatedly. Late nights were spent refining her notes, early mornings reviewing slides. And every moment in between, thinking about strategy and delivery. Her mind was sharp, her determination strong, but beneath it all, a quiet fear persisted. What if she failed? What if her efforts were not enough? These thoughts pressed on her, but she reminded herself of the courage she had discovered within. Every challenge she had faced so far had prepared her for this moment. She could do this. When the day of the meeting arrived, she arrived early, the crisp morning air filling her lungs and calming her nerves. The room was set with a long table, chairs lined neatly on either side, and a projector ready to display her work. She looked around at the clients, people she had never met, professionals with sharp eyes and confident demeanors. For a moment, the weight of the room pressed down on her, but she took a deep breath and reminded herself of the countless times she had pushed past fear and uncertainty. She was ready. The meeting began, and she took the lead. Her voice was clear, confident, and steady, her words carefully chosen to communicate ideas effectively. She guided the discussion, answered questions with thoughtful precision, and responded to challenges with calm assurance. Each moment built upon the last, and as the meeting progressed, she began to feel a sense of flow, a quiet rhythm in which fear and doubt faded into focus and purpose. The clients listened intently, occasionally nodding, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but always engaged. By the end of the session, their expressions had changed from polite neutrality to genuine interest. When the meeting concluded, the feedback was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. The clients praised her clarity, insight, and professionalism. Her manager, who had observed quietly from the side, smiled and offered words of appreciation she had never expected to hear. Her colleagues, who had been skeptical at first, now looked at her with a mixture of admiration and respect. For the first time, she realized that her efforts were not only recognized, but valued. The quiet, ordinary life she had once led had opened doors to spaces she had never dreamed of entering. The impact of the meeting extended beyond the office. Friends and family, when hearing about her success, expressed genuine pride and surprise. They saw a side of her that they had never fully appreciated, a confidence and competence that had grown quietly but decisively. Their encouragement reinforced her belief in herself, showing that recognition from others, while not the source of growth, could fuel it and provide tangible proof that change was possible. With this success, she began to see her world differently. Ordinary routines now carried potential. Daily tasks were opportunities to practice skill and judgment, and even small decisions were imbued with a sense of meaning. She moved through her days with a new awareness, noticing details she had once overlooked: the tone of a colleague's voice, the patterns of light in the office, the subtle moods of people around her. Each observation became a chance to respond thoughtfully, to make a difference, and to continue building her confidence. Despite the successes, challenges remained. Not every meeting was perfect, not every project succeeded, and not every interaction went smoothly. There were days when fatigue and doubt returned, when the spark inside felt dimmer and the weight of responsibility heavier. But she had learned to face these moments with resilience. She reminded herself that growth is rarely a straight path, that setbacks are part of the process, and that perseverance in the face of difficulty is itself a victory. This mindset allowed her to navigate the highs and lows with calm assurance, sustaining her progress even when circumstances were less than ideal. Outside of work, her life began to expand in meaningful ways. She took opportunities to learn new skills, attend workshops, and explore interests she had long neglected. She joined small communities of like-minded individuals, where ideas were shared freely and creativity was encouraged. In these spaces, she found both inspiration and challenge. She experimented, took risks, and occasionally failed, but each experience added to her sense of capability. She realized that growth was not confined to professional achievements. It could be cultivated in every aspect of life. From learning a new skill to building deeper relationships, her confidence also allowed her to mentor others, offering guidance and support to colleagues who were struggling or uncertain. She discovered a joy in helping others navigate challenges, in seeing their growth reflect the same principles she had applied to herself. Mentoring was not always easy. Questions were sometimes difficult. Advice was not always well received, but it was deeply fulfilling. She realized that the knowledge and skills she had gained were multiplied when shared, that empowering others also reinforced her own strength. As her influence grew, so did the opportunities. She was invited to lead more complex projects, participate in strategic discussions, and take on roles that required creativity, decision-making, and leadership. Each new task tested her abilities, but also provided moments of exhilaration and accomplishment. The life she had once accepted as ordinary was now filled with challenges that demanded her best, and she discovered that she thrived under the pressure. The spark had grown into a steady flame, illuminating possibilities that she had once thought unreachable. Evenings became moments of reflection and planning. She would sit quietly in her apartment, reviewing the day's events, noting successes and areas for improvement, and considering how to approach the challenges of tomorrow. Journaling became a habit, a way to track her growth, process emotions, and maintain focus. She realized that reflection was not just about understanding the past, but about shaping the future. By taking the time to pause, assess, and plan, she gained clarity and purpose that carried her through even the most demanding days. Friends began to notice a difference in her energy and outlook. Conversations that had once been polite but distant now carried depth and warmth. She shared her experiences not to boast, but to connect, to inspire, and to encourage others to explore their potential. People responded with curiosity, encouragement, and sometimes surprise, reflecting back the changes they saw in her. These interactions reinforced her sense of growth, showing that transformation is both personal and relational, affecting not only the individual but those around them. At home, she also embraced small joys she had previously ignored. She cooked meals with care, savoring flavors and textures. She explored local neighborhoods, discovered hidden parks, and attended cultural events. Even the simplest activities took on new significance, revealing layers of life she had never noticed. She found beauty in ordinary moments: the sunlight on her balcony, the laughter of strangers on the street, the quiet hum of the city at night. These moments reminded her that a life filled with wonder is not built on extraordinary events alone, but on the attention, presence, and engagement brought to each day. Through it all, she remained humble. She understood that success and recognition were fleeting if not grounded in continuous effort, reflection, and integrity. She approached each day with curiosity and commitment, aware that growth required persistence and that the journey itself was more important than any single achievement. This perspective allowed her to navigate both accolades and setbacks with balance, sustaining the spark of possibility within her without becoming overwhelmed by external validation. As the weeks passed, she noticed a subtle transformation in herself. Her posture, her speech, and her demeanor reflected confidence she had never possessed before. Her decisions were deliberate, her actions intentional, and her sense of purpose steady.